watching the Vision channel, where Habakkuk 2 and 2 says, write the vision and make it plain, so they that see it can take it and run with it. This is the channel where faith and vision collide to bring forth a manifestation. You're watching the Vision channel. I think that we are great planners, and I believe that we plan before our wedding. I truly believe that. You know, tonight is going to be about your expectation, and I know we are in reference to, is your marriage or will your marriage be season-proof? But it's going to be about expectation. I think we use our expectation to get married. I truly believe that expectation is always, it coincides with the word of faith. Expectation is just like a woman being pregnant. And when she goes to a doctor, the evidence is that she's pregnant is because she's received a seed. And once she receives a seed, automatically her mind goes into expectation. As a matter of fact, the very words that they use when it's in reference to marriage is, are you expecting? Or when pregnancy come, are you expecting? Yes, I'm expecting. So pregnancy, expectancy, and faith go all hand in hand. And the same expectancy that a woman have to have in order to produce or to be expecting, she needs a seed. She needs agreement, because it takes two people in order to align, for them to come together, to unify, for them to even bring forth a seed so that the woman can carry it. I'm getting excited. And my excitement is that when it comes to pregnancy, because I'm using this as a reference to marriage so that we can understand about expectancy and seeds, because the seed still needs a ground. It still needs a house in order to produce the seed. You know, God placed the marriage, or he placed marriage in the same similitudes that he would place the earth. Genesis chapter 1, I believe, is in verse 10, where it makes the statement, it said, and the seed will produce after its own kind. But it cannot produce until the seeds find a ground. So it's going to produce after its own kind. So it's the same thing that a man and a woman comes together, even though the man carries the seed, but the woman is the ground. So they still need to unify, to connect, to come together to produce one child, which is that one seed. And they cultivate the seed, and the mother carry the seed. It's the same thing with marriage. You cannot have one individual that's in the marriage and the other individual that's not. Everything starts with unification. It starts with the man and the woman coming to an altar or coming into a place to where they have agreement. And when the agreement manifests, once that agreement manifests, God automatically looks at that and uniformity takes place. And those individuals, Lord Jesus, those individuals that's in that relationship, that's in that marriage, must understand that when y'all become one, you become just like God, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus. Y'all become one. When God looks at the marriage, he sees harmony, he sees unity, he sees the two becoming one. Just as there's a Godhead, God places the man as the head and the woman, but it's still uniformity. And that marriage is just like the seed that becomes a tree. So the marriage has to develop. The people have to develop. Mindsets have to develop. Spirits have to develop. That marriage cannot stay in the same place, because whatever eventually doesn't grow, it dies. Growth needs to take place and transpire for that marriage to be fruitful, to be impactful. And one of the greatest attacks that's been in Christendom is on the marriages. It's on the unification. It's on the power of agreement. This is what transpired and take place, and the enemy has caused and wreaked havoc in marriages and relationships because people prepared more for the marriage than futuristically. They prepare for the wedding. That's a great thing. They prepare for their bridegrooms, their bridesmaids, and their grooms. They prepare for the food. They prepare for the cake, their wedding clothes. And they get everybody together. They get everybody to unify with their idea. But their end projection is only the wedding date. And they don't have any type of portfolio moving forward or have any type of expectation that they would have going forward in their marriage. So there's nothing that God could do without the expectation to make this marriage season-proof, because there's no expectation. This is why the Bible, and God can give you a profound revelation about marriage. This is why the Bible said, write the vision and make it plain. Because God needs you to write the vision for that marriage. If there's no vision, then people perish. For every marriage that has ever been established or will ever be established, there must be a vision for it. Not just you going in ministry, because some people consider to be marriage ministry. Well, I'm going to be a preacher, I'm going to be an apostle, I'm going to be a prophet, and all of that's great. It is. Yes, you have to talk about that. But that's not the vision for the marriage. That's the vision for the church. That's your personal vision that you come into of being a prophet, or being a pastor, or being a preacher. Yes, marriage is incorporated in it. But what is the vision for the marriage? You're talking about the vision for the church. Even Christ would come back to say, love your wife as Christ would love the church. Right. I understand that. So look at how he specified love, marriage. There must be some type of expectation, some type of portfolio that you and your spouse have to move forward. There must be a vision. Because the Bible said where there is no vision, eventually people will perish. Why? Because they cannot see tomorrow. I'm going to try my best to be as simplistic as I can to get us to understand that if you're expecting something, if you have a vision for something, then you can hope for something. You can hope for it because why? There's an expected end. And people never get to the end of their marriage. They get to the beginning, and let me explain to you this. Most people have an expectation for a wedding day. They get married, and all of this is good. That's your expectation. But once you get there, once you get married, once you jump the broom, once you establish the parties, and once you establish people, and once you establish the reception, once you establish your family getting together, you've got to that expected end. But what are you expecting tomorrow? After it's all said and done, after the honeymoon is finalized, what is your expectation beyond the wedding date? Failure takes place when things are not finalized or there's no vision. So the enemy can come in where there is no vision. And the marriage itself, once it goes through a difficult season, you don't have anything to put you in remembrance of because you never wrote the vision out for the marriage. Let me give you our foundational scripture for tonight. It's going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 1. It said, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heavens. Notice what it said. To everything there is a season and a time. I'm going to read this through verse 8. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that what is planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to reign and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time to war and a time of peace. Now, many of this, and I'm in reference tonight to storms. A time to be born. I'm going to try to break these verses down with simplicity so you can understand that the season, your marriage must be season proof. Now, you know from a natural perspective that we all have 4 seasons. 4. In every season, we know there's a winter, there's a summer, there's a spring, and there's a fall. And we know each event or each transition that's going to take place from changing from one season to the next season. We know that you cannot wear summer clothes in the winter. I mean, you probably can do it in Texas because sometimes we can have all 4 seasons in one day. You cannot, you should not wear summer clothes in winter. Why? Because it's only a sign that you have not prepared for the season that you were in. And things can transpire and take place in your own marriage if you're not prepared. Now, what we normally prepare for is finance. We're going to get a house, we're going to have a child, and we're going to make sure that we save. All these are great things to prepare for. It is. These are great expectations to have. So we establish this before we even get married. Where are we going to stay? Where our bank account's going to be. I'm going to speak from simplistic tonight. So you preparing all of these natural things, and that's a great thing. You got to make sure that you're financially stable. You got to make sure where you're going to stay. If you decide you're going to have children, you got to have all of these. You're absolutely correct. But you're preparing for one day, a wedding date. That after the wedding date, we figured it all out. But what is the focus of the marriage? What season you're getting ready to go into? Do you know the marital season that you're getting ready to go into? Are you getting ready to go in winter? See, when it says there's a time to be born, when it's a time to be born, you automatically know that something must be birthed inside of that relationship. Something must come through the womb of the Spirit. In order to be born, somebody have to do the pushing in order to understand it. And even when there's a time to be born, God is giving people time. And when your relationship, there's a time, because there's a time, there's a season that's attached to that time. A woman goes 40 weeks, which means 9 months, in order for something to be birthed. But she have to materialize and mature the seed that God has given her. So when it comes to your marriage, there's things that you must learn, and you must be mature. You must be mature in the marriage. You must learn how to communicate. You must learn courtesy. You must have a listening ear, which we're going to talk about that tonight. A listening ear, being courteous, being kind. One of the greatest detriments that I found in marriage that most people normally do, because it said in this verse, it's a time to die. Most people, I'm not talking about dying from a physical place. The Bible said that we should die daily. Death is required in every marriage because some seasons that surround you will look like death. See, some people will come into a fall season when it comes to their marriage. You know what happens in the fall season? Every green leaf dies on the tree, dies on the branch, because fall understands that winter's coming. And most of us don't understand when things begin to fall that look like they were productive or produced in our life. Most of the time that we don't know that fall is getting ready to bring winter. So because we don't pay attention to the times when we should have died to ourselves. When we should have died daily, we would understand that it doesn't matter what life's bring us, that we would not fall to the season that we're in, because we are both dead. Because there's a time that you should die. But when you die, something else lives. Let me explain this. Even though the leaves fall off the tree, and you can see them falling because they turn. When the season of life looks like it's turning against you, opposition is coming towards you. You know what season that you're in based on your marriage. It's a fall season. Sometimes God is trying to prepare you before you ever get into the season. A time to be born. Some things must be birthed. Seeds must be matured. Somebody's got to develop them. And in the process of things being born, there is a time to die. Some of us got to die to our own will, our own way, our own ambition, in order for this marriage to be successful. Ask yourself the question. If you're single right now, ask yourself this question. What areas that you know that you haven't died in? What the desire can be born to be married. Because most people, they desire to be married. Something can be sown into you, but what have you cultivated? Have you plucked up what needs to be plucked up out of you? Have you died to yourself? Are you humble? Are you arrogant? Are you prideful? Could anybody communicate and tell you what you're doing wrong? See, this is the time when you're single. When you're single, you're still married. Because you being without a person doesn't mean you're being without God. And sometimes you have to go to God and ask God, is there anything in me that will stop the marriage that you desire to bring to me? Do you appropriate time well? If there's a season and there's a time, do you appropriate the time well? There were 10 virgins. 5 were foolish. Listen, but they were virgins. They were pure. And some of you may be saying, I am pure. I haven't slept with a person. I haven't slept with a man. I'm saving myself for my husband. I'm saving myself for my wife. But are you appropriating time to understand the season and the time? Is your heart right? Are you foolish? Are you doing foolish things? Sometimes you can miss seasons that never come back around. Not once did it indicate with these five foolish virgins that a husband came back around. It said they were left in the dark. You know what that means, left in the dark? Because they didn't appropriate time. Before they got married, they missed their time. Whoever misappropriates time will miss seasons, because time is always associated with a season. But there's a purpose for everything that's under heaven. Will you miss it? And your marriage will never be storm-proof or season-proof, because there are storms that come in certain seasons. Just as we have natural storms that come in July all the way to October, we call it storm season. We got signs that say prepare. We got signs that say get all of your information, put it in stores, so it non-perishable items. We got seasons that will tell you that when you get ready to go into, it'll tell you what season you're going into. You're getting ready to come into storm season. Be prepared for hurricanes. Get generators, get gas. Are you preparing? Is your expectation that when the storm season comes, are you prepared? Do you have light? Do you have light? Do you have non-perishable items? We prepare more naturally than we do spiritually. Then when the season comes, when storm comes, the first thing that they hit is the house. If a storm hits your house, which means the marriage, are you prepared? Will you appropriate the time correctly? And this is what God is saying. He's trying to get us to understand what is the expectation that you have for your marriage. Do you have an expected end? Do you have something that you're hoping for outside of your wedding date? One of the most profound things that God told me when it came to my own marriage was about sowing. Because he said, a time to plant and the time to pluck up, which is planted. There is always a time to plant. There's a scripture that says, whatsoever a man sow, that shall he also reap. This statement that God gave me the revelation on, it doesn't matter what I go through, what I experience, it doesn't matter. You know why? Because I always sow seeds. I sow seeds. If it's seeds of listening, I got to listen. It's a seed. If it's doing a good deed, these are seeds. If it's seed, you'll never be able to sow seeds if you're not a farmer. If you don't know how to plant. If you're used to everybody sowing in you and you never sow. This is why the Bible calls it uses agriculture for life. You have to be a gardener, a farmer in your own marriage. You have to be the one to sow the seed, to sow the seeds. When God started with mankind, he wanted to make sure that he understood agriculture and sowing seeds into his own life. Whatever a man sows, that shall he also reap. The earth understands seeds. The earth understands whatever you plant into it, it will produce. It's the same thing that when it comes to marriage, that will allow your marriage to be season-proof. What seeds have you sown? That when the famine comes, you already have a storehouse of love. Did you sow love? Did you sow peace? Did you sow wisdom? Did you sow understanding? When you plant a seed, you know a season will eventually come from the seed that you planted. Even the scriptures tell us one will sow, one plants, and one waters, but God brings the increase. If God is the Lord of the harvest, what harvest can he bring you into your marriage in the season that's supposed to produce, which is the spring? Spring season? A spring season, behold, I'll do a new thing, and it shall spring forth. But the only way you can enter into a spring season where things spring forth, if you have sowed some type of seed. And time will tell what seed that you've sown. You're going to reap a harvest. Do you know how to communicate? Communication is not just dictation. You want to dictate and say you communicated. No. Communication is a two-way street. And you have to learn in communication not just to get it out, but in order to get it into an individual's heart. Now you're sowing and now you're communicating. But are you prepared for a tough season? Are you prepared to sow? God told me the reason that most divorces take place is because people never sow into their own garden, marriage. They never sow into their own field. So when the season of difficulties and challenge come, when their winter season come, they don't have any storehouse or any fruit because sometimes people are slothful. They don't do things at the right time. This is why the Bible talks about in the book of Proverbs, it said, thou sluggard. God is telling us and giving us the respective place, and he's showing us how ants prepare for seasons, and they understand. An ant can bear almost 100 times its weight. Can you bear the weight of the relationship in a difficult season, knowing that I'm only doing this because I know that a challenging season is getting ready to come, and I'm preparing for the challenge? Why? I'm going to have my storehouse. I'm going to make sure I have everything I need just in case winter comes. You have to learn how to plant. One of the things that God gave me like a representation of, he showed me like a gardener. Somebody who's planting their own garden in their own yard. And he said when a gardener goes to plant a seed, not a field, not a farmer, just a gardener, somebody who's planting flowers in their own house. He showed me this, Lord. So when it says the time to plant and the time to pluck up, the Bible, and God gave me the reference that when they went down to sow, when you find people in their yards planting seeds or planting flowers, or I'm going to use just planting seeds, he said normally they're on their knees. They're on their knees and they're planting seeds in the garden in the front yard. And how you sow seeds spiritually, you're going to have to be on your knees. If you ever find a relationship or a marriage where people do not pray, that marriage is in trouble. It's in trouble. Because the foundation of that relationship should be on prayer. That is the foundation of every marriage. Do you and your spouse pray together? Do you pray for your marriage? Are you praying for one another? Are you praying for direction? I told you, marriage, you have to have a vision. The greatest mistake that people make, they get married without a vision. Where's that marriage going? We prepare in every other area. You prepare for work. In order for me to get this position, I know I got to go back to school. In order for me to get this position, I got to get this certification. In order for me to get this position. So we prepare in every other area of our life. But when it comes to marriage, where's the preparation? What are you doing to further the relationship? What are you doing for advancement in the marriage? And people, this is why people grow apart. Because nobody's sowing seeds. So when the famine comes, please hear this, you'll know where there's a famine. And I'm just using this as an example. And I hate seeing countries that go without. I think it's in Sudan. You know, sometimes you can watch on these Christian television shows, and they'll show people like from Sudan, Somalia. You'll see these people like in starvation. You'll see them go without. You'll see them hungry, and you can see their skeletal frame because of their hunger. Hunger is always things that went without. Whenever you find a person that was hungry, that's in starvation, that's malnutrition, that's anorexic, that means whatever the nutrition that person needed, it went without. And when you can find some relationships, because they didn't prepare and they never sowed for God to bring a harvest in that season, you'll find that relationship is malnutritious. You'll find the individuals anorexic. You can see the whole skeletal or the whole system that's operating in their marriage. And you can tell when you can walk around people, you can tell that a person ain't happy. It's a sign of a famine because nobody sowed seeds that would bring a harvest, that would propel that marriage in a difficult season. And they don't survive the season because nobody planted the seed. You want love, but you haven't sowed it. You want gratitude, but you didn't sow it. You wanted affection, but you never sowed it. So how can God give you a harvest and it manifests? You wanted great communication, but you yourself didn't communicate. So everything you do is a seed. You wanted to be intimate, but you never sowed intimacy. You wanted communication, but you never sowed it. You became a dictator. So what you don't sow, you'll never see. And that marriage in the difficult season, you won't make it. And the enemy comes in and brings divorce in. Why? Because the person themselves never sowed the seed. You never became the farmer of your own house. And when a sower goes out to sow, a farmer plants, they have a keen eye to be able to tell what's fruitful and what's a weed. This is where it said it's time to pluck up. What have you plucked up? What have God revealed to you in prayer that when it came to your marriage, because there's a time to plant and there's a time to pluck up, what have you plucked up that was unfruitful? Can you tell the weeds that's in your marriage? Can you tell that something that's growing, watch this, in a fertile place, but it's a wrong seed? What has grown in the fertile place that's a wrong seed? Do you have the ability to tell? I think the greatest issue is we play the blame game. We say because they didn't do it, I didn't do it. And that's the first sign of immaturity. God doesn't look for the individual, every person to sow. Can you sow it so that you can see a harvest? When a farmer goes out to sow seeds naturally, he has a field that he plants it in. If he plants a tree, if he plants corn, then that means when the harvest season comes, the whole family benefit. See, if selfishness is not dealt with before marriage, then you'll fail. This is why God is telling you what are the weeds? Selfishness, self-centeredness, pride, arrogance, stubbornness, rebellion. All these things, if they're not taken care of before marriage, all this stuff is going to be exposed in marriage. It's going to come out. It's going to manifest itself. The areas that you do not submit will be revealed in that relationship. And we tell God that, Lord, I'm ready. But God said, listen, I still see weeds. I still see weeds that's getting ready to choke out the seeds that if I allow you to come into marriage, you've never forgiven the people that hurt you in your past, that walked away from you. And guess what? Because you have never forgiven them, when you get into the relationship, you're going to make the person pay that didn't do it. There's a time to pluck up. Have you plucked it up? Have you plucked it up? There's a time to pluck up and a time to kill. You have to understand, if you are going to kill something, this is why the Bible says death and life is in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. So death, killing something, is always a resolve of death. If you don't learn what to kill in the relationship, if you don't learn what to kill, what to take out, that's what it means. What to kill something means to take it out. If you don't understand what to take out, you'll take yourself out in the marriage. When the enemy come, would you have the understanding to take out what you need to take out? Or would you take it out on the person? Would you take the person out? Would you criticize that person? Would you ridicule that person? Will you destroy that person? Normally in relationships, we destroy other people. We kill the marriage by destroying the other person. We destroy other people because we have been destroyed before the relationship. We come into the relationship broken. This is how we come in. We come in broken and expect a relationship to be whole when we're not. So when we get into, let me tell you what seasons do. Seasons only expose the seeds that have been planted in the places you have not submitted. I'm going to say it again. Seasons reveal seeds that have been planted in you and places that you have not submitted. Seasons only reveal seeds that have been planted. Satan can plant seeds. A farmer went out to sow seeds, and all of a sudden tare grew among the wheat. And the farmer said, an enemy has done this. So the enemy can sow seeds in an individual's life. Rage, wrath, unforgiveness, bitterness, strife, envy, jealousy, all that. So when you meet jealous people, all of a sudden y'all get together and this, and the jealousy is there. You see signs of jealousy. It's not a seed anymore. You're now seeing the fruit from the seed that have matured. There are fruit that has now matured. So listen to what I'm trying to say to you. You have to learn what to kill. You have to learn what to pluck up. You have to learn when to plant. You have to learn it. And it's at a time to heal. Some people, okay, and I'll use a wound. Just say, for instance, you cut your arm. And because you have cut your arm, you can put Neosporin on it. You can put peroxide on it. You can put a gauge on it. But in the process, You need to heal. It still need time to heal. You put all these protective measures, protective barriers. You made sure that it wasn't infected. But in spite of it all, you still need time to heal. And some things in some seasons that take place in your relationship or your marriage, you're going to need time to heal. Some things are going to be said, some things are going to be expressed, but you're still going to need that time to heal. Are you still trying to function and you're hurt as if you're healed? No. There's a difference between a scab and a scar. Scabs could re-injure themselves, and it takes longer for that scab or that scar or that problem to be healed because the scab has been lifted. So the time process starts all over again. And what God is trying to say, that when it comes to difficult seasons, when things get out of hand, you both are going to have to understand that it's time to, and let me tell you this, sometimes you got to let God be the doctor, or sometimes you have to let your spouse doctor on you. And sometimes we cause the problem so much that when it comes to the pain, we don't want anybody to touch it. There's a time to heal. That was a phrase that said, time heals all wounds. Are you ready for the season that if you're hurt, whether it's by life, whether it's by family, whether it's by friends, whether it's by a spouse, will you give your spouse time to heal? Most people, I don't understand this, most people get upset with the people that they're connected to, they're married to, because they need time to heal. And the other person say, well, you haven't forgiven me. Just forget about it. And you never give that person time to heal. It takes time will heal all wounds. Now you trying to calculate the time about the person being healed. When you go through 4 seasons, in every season that you go through when it comes to your relationship, when it comes to your marriage, is it weatherproof? Everything that we do in life, the house that I live in, is weatherproof. It doesn't matter what goes on the outside, because what takes place on the inside. The first thing that you must consider and understand, that you are the first house. Not your spouse, not your natural house. You are the first house. So you have to be weatherproof first, storm-proof first, season-proof first. You have to be proven. For every natural house, it has to go through a windstorm, and your shingles on your house, it's rated, or the walls on your house, the bricks and the shingles have to be rated at least 110 or 120 miles an hour. So if it's getting gale force winds, that house must be able to sustain those gale force winds, because the house is constructed for it. It's constructed for no matter what difficult time or season that is going to go in. That house is going to have to sustain those type of storms. Why? Because storms come in a season. So what God is saying, that this house first must be built. This house must be built first. This house must be constructed first. And this is the house that is built without hands. And God built you. Once he builds you, listen, it's the foundation in you. God establishes a foundation. If the foundation is destroyed, then what can the righteous do? And let me tell you this. Have you ever seen a house that has been sitting on the market for years and no one has ever lived in it, and it looked like it's an abandoned house? Can be a brand new house. I've seen brand new homes where nobody has taken it, nobody cut the grass, nobody lived in the house, and all of a sudden the foundation shifts, the house cracks, and it looked like, and they have to sell the house less than what the house is worth, because no one lives in it. So in the process of God building you as his house, he's got to be the one that lives here. If not, it's going to look like an abandoned house. It'll be uncultivated, undeveloped, because the foundation. And God, when it comes to marriage, your foundation means everything to him. What is your foundation? Most people desire to get married without God. It's true. We don't need God. Now, we'll come to God to say amen and I do. We'll come to God, but we don't want God. Even when we have to come to God, before we get married, while we're getting married, we don't go to God to see what is the foundation. What do you want this marriage to be established on? And it's not love. Most people's definition of love is only physical. Your 5 physical senses. That's most people's definition of what love is. I'm going to show you some. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13 in verse 8. First Corinthians chapter 13. And I'm going to show you what the true definition of love is. Now, the King James Version uses it. Let me see if I can go to the American Standard Version. I'm going to go to the American Standard Version. I'm going to start at 13 verse 1. So don't get it confused when you start talking about ministry and talking about marriage, because marriage itself is a ministry. Let me show you what the definition of love is. Love is surrendering, love is submitting, but love is giving, and love is dying. It doesn't have anything to do with your physical touch. So when you say you fall in love with someone, how do you fall out of love? You only fall out of love because of the season. You wasn't prepared for the season that you were going in. Watch this. The Bible said in verse 1, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I've become a sounding brass and a clinging cymbal. Verse 2, and if I have the gift of prophecy and know all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith, so to remove mountains, but not love, I'm nothing. If I bestow all of my goods and feed the poor and give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Love suffereth long, and is kind. Love envieth not. Love vaunteth not itself. Pride. Love is not puffed up. Do not behave itself unseemly. Seek it not its own. Is not provoked. Take it not the account of evil. Rejoice not in unrighteousness, but rejoice it with the truth. Love, watch this, bears all things, believes all things, hope all things, endure all things. Love never fails. But whether they be prophecies, they shall be done away. Whether they be tongues, they shall be ceased. Whether there be knowledge, it shall be done away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part, but when what is perfect is come, that which the part shall be done away. Watch this. And this is why I say the speaking part when it comes to the season. When I was a child, watch the pedigree. I spake as a child. I felt as a child. I thought as a child. And after all of that, so you spake, you thought, and you felt your emotions. I thought as a child. He said, but he was a grown man. But he said, now that I am a man, I have put childish things away. One of the greatest challenges with us when it comes to marriage is that we get into confrontations with one another. So what happens, we make something so insignificant significant. And what happens with us is you win the battle, but you lose the war. Yeah, you won the battle in marriage, but now all of a sudden you get a divorce, but you won the battle in marriage. You won the battle, you won the argument, but because you weren't mature enough and you didn't understand what love was. You didn't understand that sometimes you got to develop patience, because love is patient, love is kind. So if love is patient and love is kind, have you been patient? And are you kind while you're patient? Because if not, you can bring detriment and destruction and damage and damnation to your marriage. And listen, we get upset with the person and we leave the person not understanding that you didn't just hurt the person, you blessed an image and blemish on God, because God is about marriage. Because you wasn't prepared for the season and your marriage wasn't stormproof. You wasn't stormproof before you got into marriage, because you never understood the definition of what God said what love is. Jesus asked his apostles this question. He said, if you love me, then he said, keep my commandments. Do you know the commandments that God has set for marriage? It's crazy that we have tires that they say they're all season. So whether winter, spring, summer, fall, don't matter what the conditions of the road is, those tires can withstand any road conditions. What's significant about every tire? It's always the tread. You know what the Bible says about tread? I give you power to tread. Over what? Serpents and scorpions. So there's going to be attacks within the relationship. And I think that people don't understand the spiritual dynamics and the attacks and the warfare that just comes along with marriage in every season. This is why I said back in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 1, it said, for everything there is a season and a time, for every purpose that's under heaven. For some reason, you think that the enemy doesn't have a purpose for your marriage. No, he has a purpose. He understands your purpose, so he has a purpose for your relationship and for your marriage. He has that purpose. There's a time to be born. There's a time to die. There's a time to plant. There's a time to pluck up. There's a time to kill. There's a time to heal. There's a time to break down. There's a time to build up. There's a time to weep and there's a time to laugh. There's a time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones. There's a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get and a time to loose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to reign and a time to sow. A time to keep silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. There's a time. And time is always associated with seasons. Are you appropriating the time properly, correctly? Do you know what season that you're in before you get married? Do you know what season that you're in with your marriage? Can you see the expected end? When you get married, do you know that's the expected end? That season end? We always have faith for the beginning stages of our marriage. We went through all this and all that. We went through all this trauma, all this in order to get married. Yes, you went through all of that to get married. That's the end of that season now that you are married. But what do you do after that season? Because you've begun another season after that season. Are you prepared mentally, spiritually, financially? Are you prepared for every season? What's your plan? Do you know where you and your spouse are going to be a year from now? What your expected desire is? Are you still believing God can do something greater or better in your marriage? Even though things are good, are you still hoping and expecting for something to be better? Because I told you eventually whatever doesn't grow, it eventually dies. There is no life, there is no roots to anything if there is no expectation. I wanted to speak simplistics tonight about your relationship, about marriage, about preparing for marriage, about your marriage being storm-proof. There are some people that have bunkers that it doesn't matter what take place in life, storm bunkers, where it's buried, it's hidden. That no matter what transpires and take place, they're already prepared. Are you prepared? Are you buried? Are you anchored in God? That when the storms and the seasons of life come, that you won't be swept or blown away? Or will you be blown away because you didn't prepare for the season that God desired for you to come into? Listen, I'm going to leave it right there because this is about preparation. Everything that God said about marriage, everything that Paul said about marriage, how God saw marriage. Let me leave you with this thought. Do you know that the Bible says if you get divorced, not because of fornication or adultery, but if you get divorced because you don't like the person in that season, and then later on in life you get married, then God makes the statement to say, then you have already caused that person to sin. If we really understood the significance behind divorce, I promise you, you would learn before you got married how God sees it, how the kingdom of God sees divorce. I guarantee if you saw it, understood it, you would know that divorce would never be an option. No matter what took place with Adam and Eve. Eve gave Adam the fruit. Adam ate the fruit. And you can tell that Adam no longer is that woman that you gave me. No matter what controversy that took place with them, the Bible made this clear. It made it clear. It said this, that God kicked them both out, sent them both out of the garden, but he never allowed them to be divorced. Never. It wasn't even his vocabulary. Jesus would tell the Pharisees, because they tried to come to him with a bill of divorce, he said, it was not in the beginning. It was not so in the beginning. How do you want a divorce now when you were so happy in the beginning? Because you did not prepare for the seasons to come, and the marriage wasn't storm-proof. Think about it. What is about the other person that's getting on your nerves? What you don't like about the other person? Another statement that God revealed to me about me. See, I like to be honest. Me and my wife, we considered having heated fellowship, and I tried to go before God. And God checked me. He checked me. I said, God, and I'm going to tell you two things that he told me. I went to God and I said, God, every time this happens, then this happens. And God turned it right back on me. Yep. And every time this happens, you do this. He checked me. And then he told me, some seasoned son only reveal in you what you haven't given to me. Some seasons would only reveal in you what you haven't surrendered and the areas where you don't trust me. This is why you're seeing the season. Because we haven't learned to give God what he desires. Before the two can become one, the one must still be one with God. And let God take out of you what he needs to take out of you. If you can't go through the difficult seasons, how do you think that you're going to get married and go through the difficult seasons as well? You won't. You won't make it. You need cultivation first. You are the first ground that needs to be tilled. Ask God to take out of you what needs to be taken out of you so that God can truly use you. And you'll be stormproof. So when you get married, the marriage will be stormproof. And you can survive that season and any other season. And let me say this. Most people's marriage are taken out in spring season. Why? Because they get prosperous. And money takes them out. When you're prosperous, when you broke, you're struggling, you there. I mean, y'all are there, y'all are. I mean, y'all are there, y'all ain't agitated because y'all know y'all have a thing that y'all have. Look, this is just a season. When I get this, I'm going to do this. I'm going to school right now, and life is going to get better. Your faith and your expectation is things are going to change while you're going through that difficult season. But once you get into the prosperous season, that's when divorce comes. How can that be? You struggled in the beginning, but you believe. But now you're no longer struggling. You stop believing. Because we get substitutes in different. I ain't got to deal with that. I ain't got to put up that. I make my own money now. Why? Because all of a sudden, you're no longer humble. And you no longer need God because you got the sufficiency. And the season killed you of prosperity. Multiplying and being fruitful killed you because you wasn't prepared for that season. You were humble when you didn't have it. But now that you got it, you're no longer humble. You're no longer thankful. You're no longer grateful because you got it. Listen, I told you I wanted to be simplistic tonight so you'll have some type of foundation so that your marriage would be stormproof. Listen, I thank you for tuning in to us tonight at spiritradio.co, on Covenant Keepers, and on the Vision Channel. Thank you, guys, and I'll see you next week on the Vision Channel. Oh, Jesus.